Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel, What COVID-19 Has Been Teaching Us About the Fight for Climate Justice. My name is Dr. Jen Gobby. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Concordia University and also a climate organizer in Montreal. I'm honored to be here at this conference and to share with you all this research project I've been working on with activists and organizers and community groups across Montreal who have been responding to COVID in ways that are socially transformative. And to give a glimpse of what we've been learning in this research project, I'd like to present this panel discussion with three different community organizers in Montreal who have been responding to COVID in ways that are pushing for transformative change in the Montreal economic, social, and political systems. So I'll present them to you now. First, we have Marlene Hale, who is a Wet'suwet'en elder, activist, chef, and educator. She was born at the foot of the Hudson Bay Mountains in Smithers, BC. She has lived in Jojagi, or Montreal, since 2012, and she's bringing attention to the Wet'suwet'en fight for sovereignty. Secondly, we have Tasnim Rekik. She's a decolonial feminist, community organizer, and mental health worker. She's involved with various anti-racist and decolonial movements in Montreal, including the Anti-Law 21 movement, movements in solidarity with Palestinians and the BDS campaign, the environmental student movement, and more broadly, the climate justice movement. And finally, we'll hear from Kristen, who's a mixed-race Japanese-Canadian woman working to carry her passion for environmental justice and community organizing into her professional, personal, community-oriented facets of her life. And she's currently managing collective gardens at a local food security organization. The questions I asked these three organizers are the following. What kinds of organizing and activism have you been doing during the COVID crisis? What kinds of transformative change are you working to bring about? And how do you think the COVID crisis has opened up opportunities or created conditions that make transformative change more possible? And finally, what has the COVID-19 crisis been teaching us about the fight for climate justice? Okay, so what we'll do is I will ask a question and then pass it around to you three. And then the second question, we go in a different order or something. So perhaps we'll start with Marlene. Marlene, would you tell us what kind of organizing or activism you've been doing during COVID?
What I've been doing a lot is, I think as we know, is really trying to stop the impact of corporations on climate change. And given that, starting with the Unistoten Wet'suwet'en Nation, making me become an activist 100% when I was just 10% that for a bit, and really have stopped many other things because we are so affected by it ecologically. The consequences have really pushed us to the brunt of possibly a lot of our animals and from wildfire, the weather, and also industry are putting our animals at risk, and our people are starving. In a sense where, as we know, we take just for fish, for example, when they all head to the oceans, from the lakes to the rivers out to the ocean, 3 million a year, 3 million passed by about 4 years ago. It was incredible. I went home that year. And for me, for one person, I was given like 70 fish. That was just out of one net. And this year and last year, I got nothing. And so, and each household is given, which is their food fish, is given two fish. That's it this year. And every house in our Wet'suwet'en region, they all have a smokehouse. So where they smoke their harvest for both salmon, for meat, for if they've got a moose, that's where they hang it. And they've got any other animals, they're drying their hide, and the smoke houses have been idle. And that really gives you a really severe, dramatic effect that it is putting on Indigenous people pretty much all across the map. As we know here, they're fighting the moose moratorium heavily. And the caribou is going extinct. And I think if we take this to the environmental court, like many cases, big cases that won, look at them as Erin Brockovich, for example, how she went up to a big corporation and actually won that case. and, you know, practicing all of our constitutional rights to the government to sue them. A lot of indigenous communities, like the Haida Gwaii, are taking the government to court because of the lack of clean air. And, you know, it's the same thing, lack of harvesting almost many things that is their right to their titles and rights have been just stripped from them in many ways. So this is where, you know, adequate stocks is no such thing anymore. It's a fighting, dwindling is really, for clean air, clean water, we are really fighting our last breath, pretty much of it right now. As we know, as a BC, this last night about 7 o'clock, the air from the California fires arrived again, and when it's warm, it's supposed to be 30 this week in certain parts of Lower Mainland, and so it becomes stifling, and it's almost like an apocalypse. And so my friends that I was talking to in Victoria, BC, when that air is out, she's indoors because of the COVID, but she can't even go on her balcony and open her door because the air is so thick. She said it's very sticky. And you know, she's got vulnerable lungs, and so she, you know, she said, oh no, it's here again. So she says, like, where do we move to? We can't move. The whole, you know, country can't move because of that. But if you're looking at the environmental mess that we are having, Ottawa is really pretty much violating our rights on climate change. And I will be addressing this soon, as you know. And, you know, the severe dramatic effect for us to live with the young people don't deserve this. They deserve a good life. Yourself, your age, the 8th generation, deserve a good life. A wonderful life, clean air, clean water. They deserve to grow old just like we have, like I have, my mother. And they cannot afford to wait any longer. We are at a crisis, and we really have to step forward like you are doing, Jennifer. And I really feel that it's forcing us to adapt. We have no choice. The COVID is forcing us to adapt to it, where our hands are tied in many ways. But like what we're doing right now, the virtual world, we're challenging ourselves every hour of the day to you know, to be with the young and the activists and fighting back, and, you know, exercising our constitutional constraints is very important. And teaching is what I do almost 3 times a week on universities and colleges that are phoning me. My biggest audience on 2 days ago was 270 students. It was wonderful. They're all across Canada, teaching them how to become a good ally, teaching them exactly where the rights of young people to bring action to the court and to the government, and which they are doing, but to challenge it. And you know, in other ways, we are out in the streets, but our voices are not heard. And so we have to establish more like a commonality all across the map of one way of something that might work. And the only thing that is going to work is if we try to put our monies together and sue the government once and for all. And really do it, you know. Wow. And where, because the melting sea ice in the Arctic is telling us exactly where and on one hand, and then the burning of the world on the other hand is closing in on us. We're right in the middle. We and, you know, Quebec has always got a major disaster every year. And so when we see what is, you know, what do we depend on? We're fighting in Montreal here, for example. The water's got you know, too much lead in it. We're fighting many other sources of our food source, and our food source is dwindling. We've got a winter coming up, and I'm very afraid for a majority of Canadians right now. poverty is there because of the environmental, they're saying grow your own things. And if you didn't grow your own things, you're pretty much going to starve this winter, because of the fact of, the food, because the gas, for them to bring it in, no flights are coming in. There's, with food, there will be the economical stretch for us to deal with. It's like a domino effect. If one thing suffers, we all suffer on the bottom, one way or the other. The only way we're to do it is, for us, it's really hard for us on our cultural and our rituals, our traditions are being hampered by it. And right now we can't even bury our dead. And because of the environment and the COVID altogether. So it really puts, no matter what you try to depend on, we have each other, we have our faith, we have our hope. And with that, we have strength. And we try to pass that strength on to other people and teaching. The only way to do that is to teach them their mental wellness and, our traditional ways, our traditional medicines. We have each other. They always say, go to, when you're eating properly, go to your omega-3 fatty acids, that's salmon. If you don't have that, what else is there an alternative? And so that's where Indigenous people are faltering. The more northern they are, we know that right now to get a quart of milk is like some places $6. So how can they feed their children? And when it's contributing to your mind, your body, and your spirit, no matter which way you look at it, the impact of what people are going through is not really a self-reliant future for us, unless we look at the who's ahead of us, the government. And we have to take a closer look and a really good, strong action right now, because elections are happening. This is our time to do it, to take advantage of our rights and our titles, and to take advantage just of our well-beings, and meaning that we do deserve a clean and a good life with clean water, good air, and we're not given either. So now we have to be stuck indoors where the air is not so good. They say get some vitamin D3 because of what you can't go outside for. And so it really gives a lot of unhealthy energy fields for us. So by finding that, without going into depression and the trauma that we're dealing with right now, to finding a healthier way is to slowly see what our actions, emotions can do towards helping others and helping us all have a better world and a better environment, which we so totally deserve. And with us, healing Turtle Island is really huge, and that's where we start. And people are doing that all over the world now. All of our leaders, all of our Indigenous leaders we look up to. And our spiritual door is always open. And if we don't have that, at least we're just feel like we're in a losing battle all across the map. So Quebec here, where I live, the energies are very desperate towards the moose moratorium for our food fish and their caribou, the moose, everything else. And they show it on the GPS where there is those animals. They're even looking very hard themselves. That gives you an idea of, as an Indigenous person, we're trying to heal the wounds of many people by doing our best to doing our part in the environmental structure of today.
Thank you so much, Marlene. That was a very, very amazing opening to our conversation. Maybe I'll pass it over to Kristen, who's also working on food-related things. So maybe I'll pass it over to Kristen to talk about what kind of organizing activism you've been doing during COVID and what you're aiming to achieve, kind of system change you're pushing for.
Sure. So I'd say there's like 2 or 3 kind of main things I've been working on. The food justice and food security part is more related to my work that I actually do. When I say work, I mean like my job. And so when we're thinking about food security and food systems, what we're seeing with COVID is a lot of the industrial food system is breaking down because it wasn't created at the scale of like much more local, and it's using a lot of exploitation, environmental degradation to be able to have more profit, right? And so when we're thinking about like environmental justice, that means that we're taking care of the people that are making the food, growing it, bringing it to us, and that we're also taking care of the environment. And we can see why that's failing right now, and all of the systems are falling apart in terms of food. And especially when you're talking about people being able to feed themselves in the city, like right now I'm living in Jojiague, Montreal, and people are so disconnected in a lot of ways from food, especially settler folks who are in the city. And so part of the work that I'm trying to do is really to reconnect people to food, help them be able to grow it, and really doing that in a way which allows people to share the knowledge they have with each other. So I'm not like imparting all of my knowledge on food. It's like everyone's kind of bringing their own stories and histories with food and learning from each other. And like we have a lot of collective gardens at my work. So that's one of the main things that I do is manage all the collective gardens. And we're trying to make it so that people are able to grow their food. It's also really great to be outside right now, reconnect with the environment when we're able to. Of course, with COVID restrictions, we've had to make a lot of changes, but one of the main activities we've been able to do is still be gardening outside. And so it really increases the social connectivity of people in a way that's still safe in the context of COVID. And that's also really important, is building those relationships between people so that we can, take care of each other. And when I talk about increasing our autonomy in terms of food, it's not just individual autonomy. It's not like I can personally feed myself. It's we can, within our community, build systems that are going to be able to feed everyone. And, not just having enough food, but having food that's culturally appropriate, having food that's local and fresh and healthy, not industrially sprayed pesticides all over everything, and where we're actually kind of trying to take care of the environment so it's regenerating and that we can provide more food in abundance while keeping like a healthy ecosystem. So that's the main thing I've been doing around food. I don't know if I should talk about the other projects, or you're mostly wanting to. Yeah, sure. So another thing I've been really working on is redistributive justice, I guess you could call it. So one thing that's really happened with COVID is that it becomes much more stark in times of crisis, whether you have enough or not. And when I say enough, I mean enough to take care of yourself and your loved ones and like your community in the larger sense. And so a lot of people are finding that either they don't have enough, and a lot of people have lost their jobs and they don't have enough savings, for example. A lot of people have been helped by CERB, but a lot of people don't get that benefit because they're maybe undocumented or for any other reason. And so, there's been some government support, but that excludes a lot of people who don't have maybe like forms of work that are recognized by the government, or aren't able to work, or for some reason aren't working. And so you're seeing a lot of people being excluded from that and not being supported. And something that we can do in our communities is think about now who has enough, who has more than enough, and what are we going to do about it? And so I think I've seen a lot of people within my communities who have more than enough and are recognizing it and are trying to think about, what do I do with that? And a lot of times it can be financial resources, it can be skills or knowledge, and it can be connections. And so one thing that we're trying to do is try to connect folks to the resources and support that they need. And people who have more of that, thinking about like what they can offer realistically, where they're still able to take care of themselves and their loved ones, but also looking out for their community and extending, that idea of what is yourself? Like it's not just you as an individual person, but extending that to the people around you, the environment around you, all of the beings around you, basically. And really trying to think about how are we going to create a place that's safe and that takes care of all of that. And that's not just so individualistic. And so one of the main, like the actual campaign was called Share My Check. And so it was encouraging people who were either receiving CERB, but have enough savings that they didn't necessarily need it, or people who are still working. Like I've been lucky to be considered an essential worker. I've been actually working throughout the whole time, so my paycheck has been fine. And so, I was redistributing a lot before this, but I kind of increased my giving during COVID because I was saving some money by not going out, for example. I can't go out social dancing, obviously, right now. It's not so safe. So thinking about all the ways I was saving money and then redistributing that since I don't need it in this moment and I'm not using it. And so we kind of had these different streams for Share My Check, where it's kind of like, share a portion of your paycheck or your savings if you have a lot of extra. share a portion of the serve if you have more than you need for yourself and your family. And then the other part was share any savings that you're having, like your pandemic dividends, I guess, if you're not going out and you're not being able to do some of the activities you normally would, you can use that money to support other folks who don't have what they need. And so that was one of the ways that we were trying to make people think more about, do I have enough? Actually, I have a lot extra. Do I need all of this right now? And am I supporting the people who are on this land and also don't have access to all of these privileges that we've had? You know, a lot of times when you think about class privilege, it's very linked to race, for example. It's very linked to education and income, and all of that kind of plays into each other. And so when you look at all the different systems overlapping, and you see the people who have more privilege, and then you have to ask yourself and ask your friends who are in similar situations, or ask people that you know what you can do and how you can really think about taking care of your whole community and redefining, like, who do you consider to be part of your community as well.
Amazing. Those are a lot of very inspiring projects. Thanks for sharing all that. Tasnim, can I ask you the same question? What kind of activism and organizing have you been doing during COVID, and what are you aiming to transform? What are you working towards? What are your objectives?
Yeah, so I felt that there were different stages during the pandemic crisis. And at first, there were initiatives to address the issues that were exacerbated by the pandemic, so poverty. I was personally very preoccupied by the high level of domestic violence. So I joined ML Center, and that's where I started. Well, I did it before, but it was my first time with ML that time, and I wanted to support abused women from my communities, especially those that are living in poverty and depend entirely on their husband financially. So I did a couple of active listening, reaching out resources. We started like a project to distribute food, giving gift cards to the most vulnerable of our communities. So, and I saw around me a lot of little initiatives like that to address the emergency of the crisis. So, for instance, in Montreal Nord, because it was one of the most infected area in Montreal, we saw organizations like Hoodstock distribute equipments, starting like a new mobile testing clinic. There were also movements around undocumented people because they were one of the most vulnerable people during this pandemic. So so that's about like the emergency phase. And then after the emergency phase, I felt like we were more able to organize better. So that's where I started to have, for instance, with Amal Center, we started to have like community meeting with other community organizers, centers, with women community, and start to work on strategies to be able to adapt our services to the pandemic and address the new issues and the exacerbated issues. So yeah, and then I was more able from there to think on building and organizing and connecting people. So that's where I moved to addressing the emergency, to build and propose and be more in the how to say into the structural change, more than just put like a band-aid on the crisis, but more thinking actively on how can we change our system and how can we address these issues that were existing before the pandemic.
Do you want to say a few words about the Just Recovery campaign and what you've been doing there with linking people, and do you want to talk like for a minute or two about that?
Yeah, so there was the Just Recovery campaign. So for me, maybe it can be I can answer the other question that you asked me, because ultimately, for me, after seeing people become exhausted with asking the minimum to survive, like for food services, community services, job inclusion, regularization of undocumented people, and all these basic human rights, I felt like it was time to ask for profound change, and that means system change. So I wanted to address the structural level of the issues and the crisis we were living in. And that requires for us to unite. And that's when I felt really inspired by the Just Recovery campaign. And we saw like Just Recovery's campaigns all over the country. And I felt that it was like people realized that it was time to take advantage of the situation and start something new. And I will say that's what I'm trying to work on since a couple of months, weeks, building relation, connecting people, creating coalitions, and really start to reject the systems that are the very origin of the crisis we're living in, including the pandemic. So I feel like, yeah, we went through like a roller coaster during 2020. A lot of people say that, but even for organizers, I feel like we went through different levels. We had a moment to think, and we also started to organize better. So I feel like there's a lot of positive coming on from this pandemic as well.
Nice. That is a perfect segue to the second sort of two questions that I want to ask, and maybe I'll ask them and then we'll go in a different order. But the second two questions I wanted to touch on is, how do you think the COVID crisis has been opening up opportunities or creating conditions that make sort of big scale systems change more possible? And then related to that, how do you think COVID, what has it been teaching us about how do we fight for climate justice? So maybe I'll shoot it to Kristen first to talk about how you think, yeah, what's this teaching us about large scale change? How's it opening up opportunities, and what's it teaching us about the fight for climate justice?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I think what I was talking about before was it's just kind of a wake up call for a lot of people on, you know, their own situation and the resilience or lack thereof of the systems in the community that they're in and how it's working or not. And so I think that just first of all, that wake up call is an important thing for people to have. And for a lot of folks who are already experience a lot of marginalization, that's not a surprise. Like, people already know that because they're living it already. But especially for more class privileged folks, for example, or white people who have a lot of white privilege, that wasn't necessarily always a present thing, of this like shock of not being able to take care of yourself maybe. And so that alone is an important thing for people to recognize and think about. And then through that, it's really hard to fight a system where the people who have all the power have all the resources. And so I think an important part of some of the work that we need to do is inversing kind of that power dynamic, or like really giving different types of power and different types of resources to communities that have experienced more oppression and marginalization throughout decades and centuries. And so thinking about like reparations to Indigenous folks, to Black folks, thinking about just that redistribution of resources back to people who it's literally been stolen from in terms of their labor, in terms of land, is really important. And so we can kind of see as we're going into this, how people are thinking more about their relationship to their community, their relationship to the land that they're on, and the whole environment, because we're really seeing how interconnected we all are with this pandemic as well. And you know, that's an important thing too, is to recognize how interconnected we are. And it kind of breaks down the individualistic idea, especially when you think about the responses we have to have on the health level. It's like, I'm wearing a mask not to protect myself, it's really to like protect the people around me, for example. and all the actions that we're doing in terms of the health protocols we're following is to protect people around us, and it's because we're interconnected. So thinking about systemic change, I think seeing some of the systems fall apart makes it a little easier to rebuild something in its place. And I spent a lot of years fighting against institutions. So thinking about McGill, for example, thinking about the government, and it's really tiring and they're really hard to change. And any changes you get are very incremental and maybe just on paper and not that tangible. You'll have a policy or something, but it's not necessarily implemented. So while I do think it's important that there are some people still, doing that policy work, what I've really been trying to put my energy towards is building our own resilience, building our own communities and our own skills so that we can't entirely live outside those systems necessarily, it's so omnipresent all around us, but we can start to make our own pathways in different communities that are going to be able to increase our community resilience so that we can take care of each other and ourselves, so that we're not dependent on the government, so that we're not dependent on a broken food system, so that we're not all stuck in this white supremacist capitalist society that is just all around us. And so it's a lot about trying to break down that and kind of create something a little bit different, really thinking about taking care of the land and the people that we care about around us. I feel like that was maybe half of the question. What was the other half of the question?
Just about what COVID crisis is teaching us about the fight for climate justice. I think you touched on that, but feel free to build on that if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the interdependence part is really what I was talking about before, and how that's showing us how extreme our interdependence is. I think for example, when you're seeing all the wildfires happening in the US and all the smoke coming up into DC, you recognize that borders don't do much when there's climate crisis, everything that we do here is going to affect the people across the world, whether we like it or not. And a lot of people that don't have as many resources or aren't causing as much of the problem are more vulnerable to that and don't have as much ability to respond necessarily, even though that some of the folks, some of the communities that don't necessarily have what we describe as traditionally resources, so thinking more about money, for example, or infrastructure, are the ones often on the front lines of this fight because they recognize already the effects and they're experiencing already the effects of climate change. And so when you think about climate justice, it's about recognizing that we all have an impact on each other no matter where we're living, and that's a big responsibility that we have. And COVID again is highlighting that interdependence in a way that maybe people can understand better than this somewhat nebulous sometimes idea of climate change. It's something that's very directly going to affect you and your health, whereas climate change actually is that, but it's a little harder to conceptualize it, I think, sometimes as well. And so it's much more tangible when we're seeing, with coronavirus. And so people are maybe making more of that link, and that's an important thing to happen.
Thanks, Kristen. That's very great. Maybe I'll send it to Tasnim next, and then we'll give Marlene the last word. So Tasnim, can you tell me about how you think COVID has created conditions or created opportunities that make transformative change more possible? And what is the COVID crisis teaching us about the fight for climate justice?
Yeah, I mean, our movements are asking for system change, right? So it means that we have to change deeply and profoundly our way of living, and the pandemic kind of given us the opportunity to change our way of living. So we have to wear masks, we don't have to go to meet over 20 people, and we had a lot of new measures, and this I feel is it's an opportunity and a chance for us to rethink our way of living, because ultimately we will have to our societies can no longer continue to function the same way. And let's be honest, we see that in every press conference, we see our governments they are completely overwhelmed with the situation. They don't know what's happening. They don't have solutions, and they see the system is cracking up, and it scares them a lot. And so I feel this is a time for change, to reject these systems that brought us to the crisis. And it's also time to rethink our way of living, to rethink, to come up with new alternatives. So I hear what she says, Marlene, about going back to our medicines, traditional medicines, going back to our communities, to build up our communities, deepen our relationships, try to work on our health and mental health systems and mental health resources. And I feel like we also have to come up with solutions that are not greenwashed. So solutions that guarantee us social justice, because we have to remember that climate justice is also it's an answer to climate injustice, and climate injustice came up from the exploitation of territories, but also of humans. And we can still exploit humans if we greenwashed. We come up with greenwash solutions. So we really have to think deeply and think for a society that is equal to everyone, and to rid of white supremacy, of course, because in some people thinking some people deserve to die, and we saw it with Joyce, and we saw it with Chantal Moore and Rodney Levy, and in the US we saw it with we saw it with all the movement around Black Lives Matter. So I feel like also these movements rising up during the pandemic really showed us the need to include the social justice movement into the climate justice movement. So nobody get exploited when we are sitting on the table talking about solutions. And we were very able to do that. Like I see a difference between the big march that we have last year with over 500,000 people in Montreal, but that was a moment when people felt urgent emergency, but then didn't necessarily wanted change for everybody. They just wanted it for the white people. So now we this time we organized a march when we asked for defund the police. We asked for regularization of undocumented people, and we asked for more radical and social justice solutions, so everybody can take advantage of our new way of living that we want to go into it. So yeah, I feel like we're really living into important momentum right now, and pandemic probably gave us more maybe it gave her a better chance to rethink our society. And I feel like we should keep going and not be like lose hope because we can't go on manifestation anymore. We can go on the ground. We can still be in the inside and think and build connection while staying home. So yeah, I feel like a lot of learning has been going on during the pandemic.
Fantastic. Marlene, your video just got turned off. Are you still there? Marlene? Marlene? You're
Okay.
Okay. Your video is off. Do you want to just turn it
off? Oh.
There's
Okay,
Marlene.
there you go. I
Okay,
think I will
yeah.
go right into the COVID, how that has changed us. I think that from the first round of COVID, we went through a lot of fear, the unknowing, and we went through a lot of trauma individually, and we went through a real bad economy crush on the majority of us. So it really has taken the toll on our whole way of thinking, and with the fear, everything else into it, it went the wrong way for many people. And so we're not making much progress as far as, the anguish and things that you were going through at the beginning. I think the second time around, we've learned now to take better practice of self-care during this pandemic. And it's really given us a chance to reflect on many things, that it's time to schedule yourself, take rest, and take toll of your own health and those around you. And the biggest thing was to really go to supportive networks that help you and stay away from the media of things that were, everybody was binge eating, binge drinking, and binge Netflix and many things. So they were doing many things the wrong way, but it was the way that they thought they could only handle it, by brushing it off by hours and hours of things that were doing them wrong instead of doing them good. And so it allows you now to take the space for yourself, and you do this day by day, day after day. And you start making a checklist of your own health, changing patterns, changing the way you think, and leaning on towards better practice, good hygiene. And when you have all of that, then it gives you the chance to go at different ways of adapting your own self-being into reading a book that is useful for you, and setting a structure yourself in your day, starting the way you did the first round of the pandemic. Put that away and say, okay, I need to not do this. I need to go forward, and to help marginalized people like our nation. Sometimes it takes its toll because we have so many hurdles to go through. Day after day, there's some trauma on the media that is pushing you backwards all the time. So to go back to the media, just to not let it get over explosive, put it away for a while, put it away for a day, and not listen to anything other than just deep breathing, allowing yourself to heal and go back and get yourself recharged. And once you do that, you're making progress to a more healthier person than you did the first time around. And find something to do, learn a language, and learn to learn to do somebody else's cultural thing. And so we've learned one thing, to really adapt to each other virtually. And it's one way that when we're doing our willingness to do this, we're helping save lives and saving our own lives through this hardest time. And we're all increasing our resilience now, because the second time around, because we know what's ahead of us. We don't know what the winter is going to bring. So we have to be prepared. And by being prepared, we have to be prepared emotionally. And to be prepared emotionally, you have to do right from the little things, daily things that you get up just by getting enough rest. You can't do anything with only 5-6 hours sleep because you're worried, you got family. We all are under the same umbrella. Being under that same umbrella, we have each other. And by having each other, we can learn to, to limit our information intake with people, and our things that are hard on us. And it's don't let it race you to consume everything that you can. It's not worth it. It's not worth it that running out and getting as much toilet paper and all this other things. Put your energies towards the good things in life by learning to make bread, learning to can, and learning to preserve, because the preserving everything else that you've got for the winter. My habit is I cook. I take one day when I'm not as busy. I learn to make stuff for 3 days. So I got enough food. So if I'm busy, and we are all busy with the Zoom world, and so I don't. That's one thing I don't have to worry about. And I take a day to totally clean the house and totally read a book. Try to read a half a book, and take the time to do that and shut everything off. And what you do is you do forest bathing, like as one thing I've learned just recently is even we don't have that here. You have it where you live, and go out in the ocean, to the forest, and breathe in that air, touch the trees, the leaves, let it sing what it's doing, the sounds, everything is doing to your five senses. And once you've got that, you're building yourself really strongly, and whatever is going to come next, you're going to do it in a healthy way, is what we have learned through this COVID. Many people made bad decisions, and it's how to repair all of what you're doing. So by repairing, and we have the energies to help the climate change, everything else that we need to do, we've got it in a clearer mind. And by doing that, we are doing something in the right direction. And by not fighting everything else and being angry about what's happening around us, being angry because we have to wear a mask, being angry because we have to be in now for 28 days, and try to put that into something positive. And when I do my meditation, you always have a positive side and a negative side. And anything negative you come in as you learn to there, just flush it. Just flush it. And when you're doing all of this, you're allowing yourself to just keep it in a clear space. And it's very important, because with me, I have a huge family. They're right across millions or a long ways from here. So it's adapting myself to speak to them and doing what I have to do, and do 2-3 Zooms a day. So I try to get organized for that, so that I can understand the information that's coming into me. I can't do it if I'm tired. I can't do it if I'm hungry. And I can't do it if I'm just angry. So I have to be in a good mind space to take all this information that's coming in, because everyone has something great to offer. And including yourself, your More Powerful Together book is a great read. It's a lot of work put into that. So you have to understand the person who read it, who wrote it, and where did she get all this information from. And the little things like that, by appreciating your smaller things, will help you appreciate the bigger picture. And where we do go into our 28 days, which we've just done now, 2 days down, it's not bad. It's doable. I'm okay if I had to be in for a week. Whereas the first time around, every day I was anxious. I stayed away from TV. It was scary. But now we know what's ahead of us. And we know that just by doing our part, we're going to be fine. But we need to be there I am there learning on my webinars, every Friday. It's gotten worldwide, and so I've gotten worldwide pretty much information of what's happening, how the COVID, everybody is learning it all over the world very differently. In Africa, for example, they had a curfew where we've never had that here. Maybe they should try it. And the country, the government here needs to look at different places, like in the East, Nova Scotia, everybody's reopening because they've got no cases. And New Zealand and many other countries that are doing really good compared to how bad we are. We know we're in a diverse society, and we also know what we have, but we can still work on it a lot better than what just closing things down. There's got to be a lot more to it than that. And the other question was?
I think you answered them both, but one of the questions was, how is COVID creating conditions or opportunities that make large-scale change more possible? And what is COVID teaching us about the fight for climate justice?
Yeah, so yeah, it has changed us, in understanding what, since the throne speech, for example, what the governments are saying and the words that they're using, the actions they need to take, whether it's a green economy, about a carbon tax, climate change, what are they doing? And this is where we have to understand that how important it is for the young people to start getting out there and voting, and make sure that the government, the right government, is in there. For example, I stand behind wholeheartedly Alex Turrell with the Green Party, and really building him up with the Indigenous people. And he's been out there on the moose moratorium and taken a lot of videos, speaking to chiefs and understanding, indigenizing himself in many ways, and on a one-to-one basis, other than making the phone calls or seeing what's on the media, but recreating your own, and creating your own self into understanding what the Indigenous people are really struggling for, and you see it for yourself. You're seeing how the treaty rights, the constitutional rights, everything else is being hampered, and how the COVID is just putting a dark cloud over that for us doing the work that we have to do. And poverty hits in really hard. He noticed the more north that you go, and what concrete actions are the people taking, to deal with the marginalized people like ourselves, and indigenizing things, everything from school to the elderly, to the way we treat our elder. Just one of the biggest things, our most precious people are being put on the back burner and are dying in front of us, and without us, we're just thinking that's terrible. It's not just doing something terrible, but taking action on it, and which I have on my webinars. We learned that on ageism and the elderly and eldership. And it's a very important question that it was a really good theme that we had for 2 weeks, was just on ageism. It's very important. How are they dealing through it, and what can we do for them? And learning about the livelihoods of everyone, from the youth who we're dealing with and helping them out through the biggest struggles, and with suicide, everything going on. There's many things that we have to be there for and understand what is going on. And so the word itself, COVID, number one, the other word, economy, and social justice, all comes in hand with each other. And if we learn to deal with the worst scenario right now, the rest can come in a little bit more easier.
I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking part in this conversation, and for all who listened in. These are important conversations. Let's keep having them. Thank you very much. Bye.